Hi everyone, it's Nichol Spohr, and today I am so excited to share with you some cards created with the Greetery's Handiwork Collection. I am passionate about cross-stitch, needlework, quilting, all the things, so this particular release super spoke to me, and I'm thrilled to be sharing some fun designs with you today. For my first card, I'm going to be sharing a hooped image. I utilized a hoop on each and every card because there are so many wonderful hoops in this handiwork collection. This is the Hoopla Oval, I love the name, and the Hoopla Oval inserts. And I used only the large insert and the large oval. My hoop itself was die cut from some wood grain cardstock, and then I embellished it with one of the hangers up at the top. For the texture in the background, I ran that large oval through my die cutting machine with the Aida cloth texture plate. I mean, how brilliant is this texture plate? I absolutely love it. We're going to embellish the hoop with some faux stitched flowers. Now, I absolutely love that these stamps from the floral sampler have the look of stitched flowers, but there's no stitching required. So this is going to instantly add that hand stitched look to your design with a lot less effort. I'm going to layer these designs. I did try it without my MISTI and quickly decided that was a no-go. So we're for sure going to use the MISTI for this. Now I want to show you a fun little tip for one of the designs. And this can work for any design that you maybe have like this. So this branch has some great detail that goes at the top, and I was really afraid I may not stitch it correctly. So I'm going to stitch the leaves and the stem first, but then I'm going to go ahead and die cut this. I'm going to line up the die with the leaves and everything and die cut it, and then I'm going to insert the die cut back into the half sheet of cardstock I'm using. And I'm actually just using a scrap of cardstock from my stash, as you can see. So let's go ahead and run that to the die cut machine and die cut it. This is going to help you line up anything that might be a little bit trickier to line up. And if you're stamping it directly on your background, it's no big deal. But if you're die cutting it and you've spent all the work doing all of the layering, you might be bummed if you take it to your die cut machine after you've stamped it and it die cuts incorrectly. So this is just a fun little hack. You can see that I'm just inserting that right back in, and look how perfectly it die cut. Oh my goodness, I love it. But wait, I forgot to do the layering for the leaves, so just place it right back into that cardstock piece and I can add the layering for the leaves. And of course, this gives you that stitched look for the leaves. And something fantastic about the floral sampler stamp set, even if you are not a stitcher, I think this is a beautiful floral stamp set for any kind of card. It's just a beautiful detailed floral set, and I highly recommend adding lots of beautiful greenery to whatever you create with this. It's absolutely stunning. So I'm going to continue to stamp a bunch of these images. I have sped up this portion of the video significantly because there is a lot of switching out stamps and a lot of layering and all of that, and we want to get through that so we can get to putting the beautiful designs together. But you can see, very easy to line up. Other than that one branch, I don't believe I did that for anything else. So that works great. Now, I did stamp a couple of these small flowers, and I actually changed my mind and ended up not using these, and instead am going to be using more of what are like lazy daisies in embroidery or needlework. I'm going to use that instead. And that was just a design change when I actually took the florals to my hoop and what I thought was going to look best for my particular design. So always keep that in mind as well. You can change your mind. It's totally okay. But I only used a portion of the beautiful designs in this stamp set. I am going to add a couple more leaves. I will stamp at least one more of one of the branches to kind of balance out my embroidery hoop design. So there will probably be at least a couple more images that I maybe don't stamp on camera. But that is just one of those things. I always start with what I think I need, and then you can always add to it later or take away if you need to as well. But whatever you feel like doing there. So now I'm going to cut apart my dies, run everything else through the die cutting machine, and we're going to be good to go to put our embroidery hoop together. So there are all my die cut pieces. For my background, I wanted to do something beautiful and special. So I've got a piece of sage colored cardstock here, and we are going to use one of my favorite products from the Handiwork release, the embroidered backgrounds. I don't know about you guys, but I love a simple background, and I'm going to just take a white pigment ink and stamp the embroidered backgrounds on this colored cardstock, and it's going to give the look kind of a beautiful embroidered fabric. You could have stamped this and then run it through your Aida texture plate if you wanted to add even more texture. I didn't because I did the Aida in my hoop, but you could, and it would be absolutely stunning. But it's just going to add a beautiful touch of interest to the background. I personally love a little something going on in the background. I don't want it to be too terrible busy, but I love it to have to not be plain either. So if you are like that with your designing, this is a great addition to this collection because it looks beautiful with everything. And I'm going to show it to you in the first two cards because I kind of had this idea of doing the stamped and layered florals in a hoop, and then we're also going to take the embroidered blooms dies and do a similar look in a round hoopla for the second card. And it's kind of the same idea, but maybe you prefer stamps like I'm doing here, or maybe you prefer dies, or if you are like me, you have to have both. So just a couple of similar ideas, but now I am building my stitch design in the hoop, and I'm not keeping it right in the hoop, obviously like a stitched or embroidered design would be. I'm going more for the look of the design rather than making sure that it's just the feel of handiwork, I suppose, rather than real life. Now, I do like to, because it is a background that has a lot going on. It's not overpowering by any means, but my favorite thing to do is add foam. Foam lifts your hoop or elements off of the background and just allows your eye to focus on that first. So we're going to pop up our hoop on this beautiful background, just like so. Oh my goodness, you guys, how beautiful are these florals? And this really tells me, what else do I need? Well, I need another branch or two. I think I picked two, and we definitely need those lazy daisies. So let's go ahead and stamp those. And I wanted to include a little bit more of the orange color family with that peachy red color that I used for some of the other florals. I had one orange, well, I guess it's three little orange buds, but I felt like it needed balanced out with a few more. So this was a good opportunity to do that with those lazy daisy stamped images. And then we will die cut these and add them to our card and finish up with some greetings. Now this Handiwork collection has absolutely everything you need from start to finish, from background to sentiment, to give that hand finished look, sewn or stitched look to your card designs. And I know I'm just passionate about that because I love stitching and quilting and all of the things. So it's so much fun for me to be able to translate that into my card making. And I see myself using this for all kinds of things, making gift sets for my stitching friends. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful collection. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up this card and move on to the die cut embroidered blooms design. Okay, I have those die cut and we're going to tuck them underneath. I should have mentioned that my two largest blooms, I did pop up with a foam square in the center. This helps allow me to tuck, branches and leaves and all of that good stuff kind of around the blooms. And again, just gives that beautiful height and dimension to the finished design. And I'm just going to continue to add all of the little things. Now you may notice that I die cut the word thanks. These dies are amazing and they coordinate back to a stamp set. So this is the stitched sentiments and dies. So you can choose to stamp or die cut. I am going to do die cut for several of the cards, and then I will do a stitched design, or stamped design as well. So I actually thought I might do green. That's why you see the die cut green, but then I thought it just blended into the background way, way too much. So I actually chose to die cut it from a gold matte cardstock, and it just pops and it blends into the little hoop hanger up at the top. I love it. We're going to layer that down. Then we are going to stamp the phrase "so much" with some clear embossing ink, heat emboss with white embossing powder, and then we'll just trim it into a little strip that we can then add to our card to finish off the design. I love how it turned out. So the next example, I've already pre-cut a lot of this off camera to save a little bit of time, but it's a very similar concept as I mentioned earlier, except this time with dies. So we're going to use the embroidered blooms, but this time also the hoopla round and the hoopla round inserts. I did go ahead and with the hoopla round insert, the large one, I used the Ada cloth texture plate to give this dark storm gray cardstock texture so that it looks like a dark Ada cloth that the flowers will really pop off of. So we don't always have to use a light color quote unquote cloth underneath. It's really fun to see what it would look like on a darker fabric as well. I used wood grain cardstock for the hoop again, and this time we're going to do more of a standard hoop closure up at the top with the little clasp and the little twisty. I don't even know what the technical term is for that, but that's what we're going to do for the top of this hoop. Now I have lots of the components out here on my table, and I went with a different colorway. I'm going to use more blues, kind of an unexpected colorway, like blues and sage greens and kind of that kind of a look. So a different type of effect. Now for my background, I also used that same embroidered background stamp with the white pigment ink, but this time on a dark blue cardstock. So it really pops. On the green, it was a little more muted, but on the darker color cardstock, it's even brighter. But I love how it looks, and it really pulls and picks up on the blues that we're using for these gorgeous embroidered blooms. I am going to use some gold matte cardstock for some of the flower centers, or I guess for all the flower centers, pardon. And then also like the little stitched swirls. They're made to look like they're stitching, like back stitch lines. And I thought the gold really picked up nicely from the gold that's going to be the little tightener at the top of the hoop. The gold that I die cut the word "so." Again, we're using the stitched sentiment die set again. We're going to use the stitched sentiment stamp set to build the rest of our greeting. But we're also going to pull in some other elements to this card. And this was just to show the difference of doing the stamped blooms, the stamped and layered blooms, compared to die cut blooms. Gives you maybe a little bit different look, but still pretty similar. And it just is another fun way to add stitched elements to your card designs, stitched floral elements, I guess I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and finish adding all of my flowers to this card, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to add next. And again, I popped up my large bloom so that I was easily able to tuck underneath that all of the leaves and little parts and pieces to really build a beautiful floral arrangement. And something I love about the embroidered blooms is, again, it gives you the look of stitching without actually any stitching. Now, notice this little lazy daisy stitch here. I was trying to be very careful about this, but I ended up placing it right where my sentiment strip's going to go. So I would lose the entire look of that lazy daisy. I am going to pry it up. I think I caught it in camera so that you can see that, and I was able to save it. And the little bit of cardstock that gets left on my hoop, on my paper, I can cover up with the sentiment strip once I add that. So you can see I'm noticing right here, I'm like, oh dang, my greeting is gonna go right through that. I'm completely losing that lazy daisy stitch. That's kind of a waste of a cute little element. And I think there's space over there on the left where I could really utilize that better. So, you know, sometimes the best laid plans and all of that jazz. I'm going to add my little gold flower centers, and before I add that last one, I did add it. Yeah, and I'm thinking, can I move it? And I'm like, no. So I'm just gonna take the tip of like a piercing tool and pry that up. So see, it left a tiny bit of the blue cardstock, but my sentiment strip will completely cover that, so I'm not gonna worry about it at all. I'm glad I left that in there because I wanted to show you guys that. Okay, I also glued, because I'm using kind of a matte mirror type of cardstock for the silver and gold elements, it tends to be a little slicker. And so I would let my liquid glue dry a bit before adding the next element. It just helped everything stay put a little bit better. If you're using traditional cardstock, that probably wouldn't be the case quite so much. And there is my little stamped and embossed greeting. Again, that is from the Stitched Sentiment stamp set. I'm adding in those little gold swirls. In fact, I used one and I was like, oh, I really should use the other one. And I'm glad I did. I think it balances it. I will be popping up this hoop with foam adhesive as well. But then I thought, because this is a different shape, the oval takes up more of the front of the A2 card base. What could I add to this design that really helps with the design element? Well, my favorite thing from the release, I shouldn't say my favorite because all of it's my favorite, but the notionable dies. You guys, let's make some scissors. This scissor set in the notionable die set is probably my favorite thing. It's a toss-up. I die cut it from the gold and the silver cardstock, and then I'm just taking my scissors and I'm cutting off the handles from the gold set, and we're going to layer them over the silver, and then we're going to put the scissors together with a mini brad. Do I still have mini brads in my stash? I sure do. But any little brad will do. You could even just glue them together if you don't have one and put like a little pearl over the top, or even make your own pearl with some Nuvo crystal drops or something like that. But if you have a brad, I'm going to show you guys my favorite thing about this. And I think I picked a gold one to just kind of, balance the design or whatever. I'm going to put my little, and this is a mini brad, but I think a standard small size brad would work as well. Look, oh my gosh, you guys. I know I'm silly, but I think these are absolutely amazing. They're my favorite thing. And look how cute they look next to that embroidery hoop. It's just incredible. I love it so much. Now the spool also so amazing. The detail on the top, I don't think I hold it up close, but you probably have seen it in the photos. It kind of embosses that, the text into the top of the spool. So it looks like a vintage spool or or just a spool. The vintage ones are cooler, let's be honest, but it's so cute. So there is my little spool of thread. I did die cut a little thimble from some silver mirror cardstock as well, just to balance it out. And I love all of these little, yeah, I'm still playing with the scissors. I love how all of these elements just help tell the story and really just make this set even more spectacular. And I love how they look. So definitely grab this set and you'll use it over and over again. Isn't that so much fun? Okay, so that was my example of the stamped and layered florals and the die cut florals. How about we make a beautiful sewing machine? So this is called So Vintage. And it is beautiful. It is the sewing machine die set, and then there is a coordinating stamp set. And the stamp set is really what makes this spectacular. And it is made to look like a vintage featherweight. So if you are like me and you have a featherweight on your list of things that you would love to have, or maybe you own one, or you just want to make them out of paper, this set is for you. This is amazing. Now I did die cut the top layer, the black glossy layer of my featherweight So Vintage sewing machine out of glossy black cardstock instead of just a regular matte black cardstock. And I'm going to give you my tip for this. So kind of like the flower from the first card, let's put it back in the cardstock we die cut this from, because it's going to line up so much better. So I was kind of showing you how it's just not going to line up very easily if you just try to line it up with this piece. But if you line it up with the background piece, it's going to be so much easier. And let's say you want to make multiple cards like this. You want to make a card set of sewing machines. You could simply die cut a bunch of these and just put them in and stamp those over and over. Now, you're going to stamp the base layer of this, and I used a clear embossing ink, and I'm going to use an antique gold embossing powder. I think white would also look amazing, but I wanted to do some gold. I was really trying to make it look like some of the featherweights I've seen, and I'm going to go heat emboss that. Look at that. Now, do you see that little piece right, or where the scrolls right along that top arm of the sewing machine? There are several interchangeable sentiments from the stamp set that we can add there. I kind of forgot to do it, so I will add it here in a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and put together my sewing machine, but that's not a big deal. I'll use an acrylic block to add that sentiment here in a second. If I had thought of it, I would have done that before, but like I said, I almost forgot, and it's one of my favorite things about this, the stamp set that coordinates. I am building my sewing machine. It even has a teeny tiny little spool of thread that fits right on the machine, as well as all these great little elements and a spot for your thread to be threaded through. So I am going to assemble all of this. There's a piece of fabric, so it looks like you're sewing along. I know that all of my sewing friends are just going to love this set. No sewing required for those who do not want to sew but love the look of a sewing machine. I just think it's absolutely adorable. Now for my fabric, quote unquote fabric, I'm going to put in my sewing machine. I actually die cut some pattern paper that has a teeny tiny floral in it. I think cardstock would be awesome as well, but if you have some pattern papers in your stash, especially smaller prints, they would be phenomenal for this. So I'm going to pick a pattern paper with a dainty floral. I wanted it to look kind of vintagey. What's funny is it always reminds me of my grandmother's sheets that she had on her bed. She always had floral sheets, and they were some of my favorites. They were always so soft. So that, and then I'm going to match I know it's kind of doesn't show up great right here, but in the photos at the beginning and the end, I think it shows better. It has like a dainty yellow little floral. I'm going to pick a yellow cardstock for the thread, and then the thread on the spool. So for those two little pieces, we will die cut a yellow cardstock. I'm going to use this acrylic block to stamp my sentiment on the sewing machine, which is "You're so kind." I love that the sentiments all very much coordinate back to some sort of sewing. And then again, I will sprinkle on some antique gold embossing powder and emboss before we put our thread in the machine and put it all together. Just tap off that excess, and then I will go and heat set that really quick. I did that off camera. Now I'm kind of keeping with the hoop theme. So we will be creating a hoop for this card as well. And I'm going to go back to the large oval, but this time we're going to do different hoopla round inserts. It has this beautiful scallop stitching. And I think that will be really, really fun instead of doing the Ada texture plate. I'm just going to glue that thread. See how it goes from the spool of thread on the machine, and then it goes through the guide and down through what it looks like through the sewing machine. I just think it's the cutest thing ever. I absolutely love it. I want to make these just to display. So fun. Okay. So once we have that put together, like I said, I want to make a hoop. And I very much just kind of picked a very tone-on-tone light pattern paper for the background of my card. I've got those hoopla round inserts. I'm going to use the large hoop shape because that matches the hoopla, oval hoopla perfectly. And then we're going to use the scallops, some of these inside pieces. I'm going to use 2 of them. There's 4 total, but I'm going to use 2. And I'm going to add some of that stitching detail to this cardstock so it looks like it has a little bit of that stitched texture to add interest to the background of our embroidery hoop. Now again, I'm not worried too much about keeping the design right inside of the embroidery hoop, more of adding, all of those different sewing and stitching elements to the design. I'm going to carefully peel that off. I'm always worried it may tear the cardstock. It actually did the first time I did it. That's why I used a different tape the first time, so I switched tapes. And then we're going to turn our hoop sideways and do a landscape style card. And I think that our sewing machine is going to fit in here perfectly. We will do more of instead of the hanger on the hoop, we'll do more of the traditional type hoop for this one as well. It really doesn't matter. I love that there's lots of different options in each. We'll cut our background pattern paper to 4 by 5 1/4, and then we're going to assemble our hoop and pop it up in the center of our card, and then we'll add a sentiment. The sentiment for our card today also will come from the Sew Vintage stamp set. So in the stamp set that coordinates with the Sew Vintage sewing machine, there's the small phrases that you can use right here for the sewing machine, but then there's some larger phrases that just complement the design perfectly. I'm going to stamp beautiful things come together one stitch at a time. I think this is a beautiful sentiment and will work perfectly for my card. I'll stitch it in black, trim it into a sentiment strip that I can then pop up over the lower part of my hoop design. It will cover up some of the fabric coming out of the machine, but it doesn't bother me, and I feel like, it just kind of complements, again, the design perfectly. Adding all those layering elements, the detail elements for our oval embroidery hoop. I love that there are different sizes of hoops here, or different sizes and styles for that matter. And there's even some little mini hoops. I'm not showing them in this video, but I love them and have used them for some other projects. So I'm just going to stamp my phrase really quick, trim it into a sentiment strip as I mentioned, and then add that to the card. Now I did decide to add a few finishing embellishments to this card with a scattering of some gold star confetti, just for a little bit of glitz and glimmer. For our last card today, or the last card share today, I am going to be going all in on the notionable dies, plus we're going to incorporate the hoopla round to build all the sewing notions that you might have in your sewing stash. At the beginning of the video, I talked about how with the stitched sentiment stamp set and die that I used the stitched sentiment die for the first two cards. This time we're actually going to stamp the word sew right on our background embroidery hoop and not do a die cut. And that works well too. So you can do either one here. Now I'm building the smaller round embroidery hoop, and I used the large one for the second card, but we're going to go with the smaller one this time. For the background, I have that same light cardstock that I will show you how I embellish with the hoopla round inserts. But I'm building the pin cushion right now. There's 3 pieces for the pin cushion. There's the pin cushion, the tomato itself, the first layer, and then finally the top layer that has kind of the little leafy stem part, I guess, of the tomato. Then there's the strawberry, which is absolutely adorable. I did die cut the tomato from a darker red cardstock and the strawberry from more of like a cherry colored cardstock so that it would be slightly lighter. There's not a huge difference, but I do think there's enough that it kind of gives it that fun, you know, it makes it stand out a little bit better. Then one of my favorite things, again, maybe I should stop saying that, it's all my favorite, is the little pin card, or the little card that you can keep the sewing pins in. I thought this was adorable. It comes with the little slits stitched in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually using a piercing tool to lift it a little bit to make the pins slide in easier. The silver mirror cardstock is a little flimsier than regular cardstock, but I loved how it looked like pins. So that's why I'm using just being really gentle and lifting up with my piercing tool and then sliding the pin in place. Now, before I embellish the pins, because you'll see all the pretty colored little confetti there on my table, I am just going to put the pin in and glue it down. I found it easier to do it this way, and then I can glue some fun colored tops onto my pins. And of course, I want them to look like glass top pins, so we'll add some glossy accents on top of that to make them pretty and glossy. You could do this in any color way that you like to coordinate back to any type of project, or whatever color you're using for your background, etc. So much fun. So I'm going to let that sit for a minute. I couldn't get enough of the scissors, so we're going to make another set just like the one before, and I am going to assemble them exactly like you saw me assemble them for that second card, where I've used the silver and the gold matte cardstock or mirror cardstock, and then we will assemble them with a little mini brad again. The other elements that we'll use for this is the spool of thread, the thimble, and this time the needle and the thread. Everything you need to build the perfect little stitching sewing box. I know that this is going to be one of my favorite kind of cards to make. I could see mass producing a lot of these pieces and putting them together and making card sets for friends, like thank you card sets and things like that for all of my stitching friends. As I'm working, you may notice that I do use an acrylic block quite often. I don't use it for anything really, not that much anyway, not for stamping, but I do use it a lot to hold things that have been glued down with liquid glue, to hold them flat while they are drying. Now these little pieces of the tops of the pins, or what I'm calling the glass top pins, are a little small. So I would recommend an embellishment wand like I'm using here, or some tweezers, something to that effect. I even just pulled off the top of my red pin, so I'm gonna have to fix that. I just held on to it for a minute. And we're gonna try tweezers this time. Here's the glossy accents. I want to go ahead and get that applied so it starts drying. Just a nice thin layer, but this is what's going to give it the illusion of glass top pins. And I love it. I think we have all of the assembling other than the scissors finished. And then we're going to work on the sentiment for this card to finish it all up. These scissors are just literally the cutest thing. I love them so much. And I can't quit doing this with them either. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I used the Hoopla round inserts to die cut my quote-unquote fabric that goes inside the hoop. We're going to stitch the word sew from that stitched sentiment stamp set using a dark navy ink that matches the blue cardstock I used for my spool of thread. I wanted it to look like you had stitched the word sew onto the fabric and you have your needle and thread and your spool, everything right there. Then I'm going to take the phrases "you are" and "wonderful" and we're going to position those and stamp those right on our circle as well. Everything for this one is going to be actually not an additional layer, but stamped right onto the fabric inside of our hoop. Our paper fabric, I guess that is. Next, I'm going to take the Hoopla round inserts and using the largest scallop, or not the largest scallop, pardon me, the smallest scallop, I believe, I'm going to go ahead and run that through my die cutting machine to add that stitched texture around the edges that will show just a little, that little pretty scallop when we add our embroidery hoop. So I'm just going to put a little layer of glue all the way around, just like so. And then we are going to assemble our card by placing everything onto a pretty pattern background. And again, I just picked something light and pretty so that the die cut elements would really pop. I'm going to pop up quite a few of the elements on this card with foam adhesive. The exceptions to that are going to be the scissors, which are pretty delicate, and I didn't pop them up with foam on that second card either. I just creatively put a little glue on them and tried to position them in a way that was natural. I'm going to put foam on the back of our needles, our pin cushion, spool, and I think hide a little, I don't know if I needed any foam for the thimble actually. We're going to layer that on top of the pin cushion. I'm being creative with the foam placement so that there is not foam where those elements overlap the embroidery hoop. I did that first and then we're building out to each side with our additional elements. For the needle and thread, the needle is going to be glued directly to the embroidery hoop, and then we will creatively add some adhesive to the thread so that it attaches to the background and it just kind of hangs there, really. We're going to put a little glue in a couple of spots so that it's secure, but I love how it ends up looking like it is a piece of thread. And there is the finished card design. Let's take a look at all 4 finished cards using the Handiwork release from the Greetery. So first up, we have our notionable card, our beautiful So Vintage, the embroidered blooms, and of course, finally the floral sampler. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you enjoy the Handiwork release from the Greetery. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!